Hey everybody, this is Gaynor Meilke at the Red Divorce, where we are talking about saying I do to life, love, identity, family, and enterprise anew when you're contemplating divorce, going through divorce, or on the other side of divorce, or if you want to divorce something in your life. This is primarily talking about marital divorce and getting through that journey and all of the elements of it. I am a certified conscious success coach, a certified conscious parenting coach through Dr. Shefali's Conscious Institute, and also a certified business and executive coach, as well as the owner of Charisma Inc., which is a PR strategy and marketing agency. We also do AI and technology training. So I kind of come at this in a lot of different disciplines, and it's just been my passion to try to help people in whatever ways I can. And having gone through divorce myself and got through on the other side, with my daughter also doing well, and I think everybody doing better than we were in our former marital state. I wanted to put together this program as resources that might help you, and it might help you even avoid divorce. I am also a certified marriage trainer, an educator through the Paul Friedman Marriage Education Institute, and his um, Break the Cycle book is a good one. If you're contemplating divorce, you might want to visit that first and kind of see where these patterns are emerging. And that's really where I wanted to start today about patterns. There are basically five different patterns, and I go into that more deeply in our Red Divorce program, and you can find out more about that at planctraining.com. But when we run into a relationship rupture, and that's what a divorce is, it's basically a probably the biggest rupture of a relationship that can occur between married people. But there's probably a lot of little ruptures that weren't repaired along the way. And that's the rupture and repair cycle that many people do not learn. And I know I did not learn that in my childhood. And of course, they don't teach you these things at school when you're young, which, again, is why I want to help with conscious parenting so that you can show your children how rupture and repair works in a good relationship. But when we have either very toxic cycles or cycles that would keep repeating, we need to start looking at what our own patterns are. And then also you can start to see your partner's pattern and how the reaction did not go very well if you're looking at getting divorced. So, you know, I am a big proponent of no abuse in marriage, and there's a lot of people who don't agree and I think don't live that way. And when I'm talking about abuse, we think physical abuse first. Of course, if you're facing that, you should definitely leave and call the domestic violence hotline. I have those resources on our website as well, but you can look them up and also do that in a safe space. But there's also verbal and emotional abuse, which can, psychological abuse, all of which can be equally as problematic. So when we think about this, it could be negging, which is like negatively trying to bait your partner. Um, and over a long period of time, if you've continue to do it even though they've asked you to stop. That's an abusive behavior. Yelling, you know, road rage. There's all kinds of things where turning things around that are your fault, blaming you for things that you had nothing to do with. All of these things over time are ruptures. And if they never get repaired or even addressed, then it's not a big surprise that the relationship doesn't last either. So when we think about why do these things occur, a lot of it comes down to three things. And I heard this Esther Perel, who does Where Should We Begin podcast, but she was on the show Call Her Daddy. And I thought this was very good takeaway that just came down to the brass tacks. And that was really most arguments in couples and the friction is about power, trust, and value. So if somebody's viewing the relationship as always needing to have control, they're not going to acknowledge any of their wrongdoing. They're not going to apologize. And they're going to try to dominate and make a lot of the decisions, which is not a good way to have a partnership. Then there's the trust factor. Oftentimes, if you're trying to exert control over somebody, you're eroding trust. Or if you engage in behaviors that do not create trust in a relationship, then you're destroying it at the same time. So it's interesting that people often marry initially for love, but that chemical love will go away over time. But for the security, and then they're not giving the security. They're they may be giving it financially, and then that creates issues, or physically by being there, but they're not really there, or by providing shelter and childcare and all of those transactional things, but they're not really providing any psychological or emotional safety. And and when somebody's, yelling or aggressive or um, saying negative things, that's not creating any physical safety either, because that's where our nervous systems start taking in all of the negativity as not safe. So that's where things start to break down. And if you're in a relationship like that and you feel a lot of anxiety and fear, that's your body protecting yourself. And that's something that I wish that I had known. I literally was really scared a lot of the time and fearful, but I just took it all in because I had to get through it. And that was because, my ex was very aggressive because he had, you know, his own internal issues and wasn't able, he didn't want to, he chose not to do anything about it. And even though I had gone to therapy with him at the beginning of our marriage, I had brought it up several times. I think back and I'm like, oh my gosh, all of the red flags I missed. Um, And that's what's really sad. And that was really the demise of our relationship. Um, but it's just something to be aware of that, you may think that in a relationship you should dominate and you should get your own way. Well, you're eroding any kind of safety in the relationship because you kind of make the other person you can give up or they get angry about it. And so if you can't compromise, like that goes to the heart of a good relationship, then you won't be able to really compromise on anything, which is very, very sad. But there's a lot of relationships like that. And then when somebody does get hurt, the other piece of it is, can I trust you to come back together and care enough to hear what is wrong with me and learn from that experience? Because if you don't want to do that, if you stonewall people, or if you avoid taking any responsibility, if you don't apologize, basically you're telling the other person, I don't value you. I'm more important than you. So there, in a nutshell, we talk, I think it's the Gottmans have the four horsemen of the apocalypse of like marriage. So when, I think there's like the four C's, it's contempt, communication, there's, um, I'll have to go back and look up the four C's. But if you think about, what I'm saying, the power, trust, and value dynamic, I mean, if you're not willing to be accountable, acknowledge, and take action to make things better, that's saying a lot about who you're really serving in the marriage. You're not serving the other person as an equal partner. You're just trying to protect yourself, and it's a short-term view. And of course, we get very activated because we haven't done the healing work within us. So that is definitely kind of like a very short course on why a lot of marriages break down and why people kind of diverge from each other. And when I think about in my own situation, one of the reasons I like to focus so much on the abuse dynamic is because, I think as a society, we've become much more willing to just go along and take things that we never would have in the past. I know I wasn't brought up in my home of origin to be disrespectful, but people are disrespectful today, and it's just sort of, well, everybody's allowed to say whatever they want. And I think if you go into a marriage like that, it's not going to be successful. You know, I think that people say, oh, well, divorce is such a tragedy, but divorce is also a sign that the marriage was not approached with care or concern. It became a dumping ground. And I don't think that when you make a commitment to somebody, you should forget that that commitment is not to make your marriage a dumping ground for everything. And we'll have another episode about that. But that really does oftentimes become the place where people just put whatever they want into the space that's supposed to be sacred and safe. Um, and they then wonder why things fall apart. Now, there's also the history of marriage to consider, and we've made it into something in society that um, it never really was intended to be. It used to be just a way to transfer property, and women were married because they needed a male partner to look after them financially. And, they did all of the work because, like with children and cooking and cleaning, because, the male partner was out earning a living or working the land or finding the food. But all of that has changed, and we haven't really changed the way that we think about marriage, except that now we've made it into a life goal that we check off the list, and we're supposed to be able to live in harmony and happiness forever with somebody who we probably have only known for 2, 3, 4 years, and you don't really know somebody until you've lived with them. So just all of this to say that wherever you are in the divorce journey is okay, because I actually think it's a small miracle that 50% of marriages last. But I don't know how many of them are truly happy. Nobody does that study, but maybe I will. So just a little bit on my approach to how I think about divorce. I don't think that divorce is the only option, but I think you have to start thinking about what is the best option for you. And also, above that, if you're married to somebody, you should want them to be able to achieve their goals. And if you don't want to, or you're jealous of them, or you don't want to see them succeed, then you should think about why that is and not have resentment over what they want to do with their life. And I think that was an area in my own marriage where, my ex didn't um, want to see me succeed. And if he asked himself deep down, that was probably because he felt threatened or um, like he wasn't going to achieve those things, so I shouldn't either. But I wasn't raised that way, and I think once I woke up to the fact that there was a whole lot of stuff going on in the background, um, I realized that I was a person too who needed to move towards their better path. And I hope that that is freeing for you as well if you're contemplating a divorce because you have goals that just don't align with where your current partner is. You may be at different levels of consciousness, and that's okay. Maybe they could catch up. Maybe they want to catch up. But if they don't have any interest, then you also have the right to consider whether you want to move on with them. But you also, of course, need to do a 360 if you have kids, what your financial situation is, and all of those things. So those are things that we'll talk about in this series as well. So for now, I know I've given you a lot to think about in how to approach where you are in divorce, what you're thinking about, what your philosophy on marriage is, what your philosophy on divorce is, and what your life philosophy is for yourself and for the family that you have or would like to have, or maybe you don't wish those things either. So, this is where I say that talking about divorce is going to help you if you're considering marriage. Think about what a weighty commitment that is and what the consequences are of not treating it as such every single day versus if you're in a marriage and all of this has just kind of come into your consciousness, what do you want to do next? Because you do have the opportunity to use divorce as an opportunity, and that's why I say I do to life anew if that's the best path for you.